In calling the member, I want to thank him for his politeness and allowing a more coherent debate.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and it was a pleasure to yield to my colleague, even if I don't agree with aspects of his contribution. Sir, in speaking in this earthquake-prone buildings amendment bill committee stage debate, I want to begin by focusing on a piece of this legislation which may not have been concentrated on so far, and that is the provisions around heritage buildings. Because, well, there are two reasons for that, sir. As a resident of Wellington, where we have some wonderful heritage that needs protection, but also as a resident of the second most vulnerable capital city in the world to seismic events, after only Tehran, which is the #1 vulnerable to seismic events. I think there are some balances that we have to strike in this legislation to ensure that our heritage is protected, but that human life is also protected. Sir is someone who not only works in this beautiful heritage building 3 days a week, but lives in a heritage apartment block from the 1930s. It's something that is on the mind, I know it's on my mind, and that of many Wellingtonians. So I think if we turn to clause 23 of this bill, which amends the Principal Act, the Buildings Act, Section 133AT, which talks about the owners of certain heritage buildings being given an additional time, I think this is a sensible measure. If we look at the times that it would be required in Wellington, Wellington is the highest risk area, so there would be a 5-year period for investigation and assessment of buildings, with a further 15 years provided to allow for upgrades and renovations to take place to bring the building up to standard. In addition to that, this particular section of the bill would allow an additional 10 years for the owners of Category 1 listed historic places. So those are buildings that are listed in the New Zealand Heritage List, maintained under Section 65 of the Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga Act 2014. So those are the most significant, most important buildings, and we've had a number of them actually feature in the media recently. The excellent work that's been done on the old Public Trust Office on Lambton Quay, for instance, the corner of Lambton Quay and Stout Street. That is a building of significant architectural heritage, which has been renovated up to a very good standard using the latest technology to allow it to continue to function as offices for the, including for the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, but also it is rumoured to feature a new Jamie Oliver restaurant, another fine eatery for our capital's entertainment sector. So the sort of work that would be required there may actually be significantly more expensive than building owners can afford to do if it was required to be delivered within that 20-year period of assessment and renovation that would usually be provided for in an area like Wellington. So I think the addition of that extra 10 years for those most important buildings, those very significant, perhaps even unique examples of that style of architecture in New Zealand, for them to be preserved, that is sensible. But we have other issues here in Wellington, and the Harcourts building further down Lambton Quay, which is it's not a Category 1 building, it's a less exceptional example. It's having previously worked in that building, it's used in part by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's not actually a fantastic building in its current state. It's not, in my view, particularly aesthetically pleasing. However, it does have certain protections applied to it, and that has complicated the renovation and strengthening process there. I think this strikes a sensible balance in this part of the bill between the need to protect human life and giving building owners of those heritage buildings sufficient time to undertake the work. So I would particularly want to applaud and welcome that provision in the bill, sir. That's clause 23. Thank you.